Bitcoin's lost 89k, a double bottom could be forming, but did Trump's economic policies stall crypto's momentum this year? Let's find out. Hi, I'm Paul with ArcisFX with your Bitcoin update for the week. Stick around until the end for this week's summary of key levels to watch to inform your trading. But first up, did US economic policy in 2025 negatively impact crypto despite the big promises? We did get a US Bitcoin strategic reserve, but it wasn't designed primarily to accumulate Bitcoin like Strategy Inc. as an example, but rather just to utilize existing stockpiles from confiscations, etc. So we had a lot of talk and we had some actions, but the reality was this. The S&P 500 returned roughly 25% in 2024 and 17.5% in 2025 this year, comparing to approximately 47% gains over 2 years. Now, the Nasdaq 100 delivered 25.9% and 18.1% over the same period for a cumulative gain of nearly 49%. And then the CoinDesk 80 index, which tracks the next 80 crypto assets after the top 20 by market cap, fell 46.4% in 2025's first quarter alone and sat down roughly 38% year to date by mid-July. So what is going on here? So on one hand, we potentially have a tech bubble forming in the stock market, driven up by AI hype and the usual divergence between the US stock market and certain economic realities. But then we have the brutal trade wars, which were instigated by the United States, that has led to 2025, I suppose, being very start-stop, creating the worst possible conditions for altcoin trading. And you can see here, this is essentially altcoin's performance over the last couple of years. It has been in a strong downtrend. And despite having some gains at the beginning of Bitcoin's bull run, it hasn't managed to manifest any sustained gains like previous altcoin seasons have given us. So the path to altcoin season starts with phase one, Bitcoin, where essentially the money flows into Bitcoin, causing prices to surge. Now, we've had that over the last 2.5 years. And then people start taking their profits from Bitcoin and start putting them into Ethereum as an example. And then Ethereum starts to outpace Bitcoin. Now, we saw this happen in July this year. So that was phase two. So we did enter phase two. And then following that, people take their profits from Ethereum and further profits from their Bitcoin positions and then start putting them into the other large caps, which we then enter phase three. And then by this time, the market is ascending upwards with consistency over a period of months. Then finally, profits from all of these positions then get cycled into the rest of the altcoins, including the mid caps and the low caps and the micro caps. And then they all pump together and we have an altcoin season. But we really have been stuck here between phase two and phase three. So even though Ethereum has started this process of what typically triggers altcoin season, we haven't had any follow through. So despite the hope for the new US administration being friendly to crypto, despite some meaningful legislation, the reality is, intentional or otherwise, has been somewhat different. Now you can see we are primed for an altcoin season, as recently Ethereum has started outpacing Bitcoin again. But if Bitcoin continues to be bearish, it's going to be interesting to see how Ethereum and the rest of the market reacts, because typically you need Bitcoin to be either very bullish or with a bullish posture in order for altcoins to make any progress and that cascade to work. So 2026 is going to be very interesting for altcoins, and we're going to get into this more over the coming weeks. But the evidence that we've had a muted bull run due to these macroeconomic factors is displayed quite well on this rainbow wave, which you saw at the start of the video. So previous cycles, this is the 2015 to 2017 bull cycle, topped out essentially on this red line of this rainbow wave. And then you see the 2020-2021 bull cycle also did the same. But this one, you can see we've been stuck below this mid-range yellow line essentially. And it looks like we have a topping pattern and could be heading lower, which of course looks like the lowest point on this chart would be around 55, 49k, something like that. So this is the bearish narrative for Bitcoin, but it also underscores how Bitcoin has struggled. Because if you imagine a year, if you imagine 2025 being slightly different, where we didn't have war in Iran and we didn't have war in Ukraine and we didn't have all of these stop-start tariffs, very, very serious and very impactful tariffs throughout the year and all of that uncertainty, this run here, this initial run from Bitcoin, say, which started in late 2024, should potentially have continued all the way up here. But because we've got all of this negative news coming out throughout the year, it has to stop and pause while investors wait to see what the impact of whatever news is happening. It has to stop and pause to assess what is going on with tariffs and so forth before entering their positions. And then, of course, that delays progress. And then we arrive at the back end of the year having only managed to really make modest gains compared to the previous bull season. Whereas if you imagine a 2025 without any of that inhibition, without the trade war and without that uncertainty, then you can see very easily how we could have progressed significantly higher, as these current prices of around 125k were very modest compared to what was expected, were very modest compared to what I expected, expected, and therefore it highlights the very importance that even though Bitcoin is a store of value asset, it is still vulnerable to these macroeconomic headwinds, and the altcoin market has no chance in the face of that uncertainty, because unlike Bitcoin, which has the store of value narrative to help buoy it up, the altcoins haven't had that shield, and therefore we've left with a situation where really looks like Bitcoin's heading down from here. Now, does that mean we can't have a recovery from here? We could. If you look back at 2015 to 2017 cycle, just as we were heading downwards, we had a very strong relief rally before heading off. These patterns and these waves are very important and fundamental, and the price action typically will follow them, but it doesn't mean we don't get anomalies. And because we've essentially this year has been a complete anomaly because of the economic conditions, we could very easily see a move up from here, which would tap maybe 200k before then moving downwards like this. So there is still a bullish narrative, but right now the reality is that it hasn't been a good year for crypto. It shows how bullish Bitcoin is because Bitcoin has managed to stay afloat and still put in some impressive gains. But the rest of the crypto market just hasn't been giving anyone any love, and therefore the stock market has been king this year. So the question is now, despite a muted bull run in 2025 for Bitcoin, will 2026 no longer be the bear year? And will 2026, with improved macroeconomic conditions, could we see Bitcoin move up here to maybe around 200k before then receding? But the reality is that it doesn't matter how friendly, how open an administration is to crypto assets. If their economic policy just flies in the face of their intent, then we do not get the bull runs we expect. We don't get the altcoin seasons we expect, which is why essentially, if an administration really wants to be supportive of crypto, they need to understand that crypto, the majority of it outside of Bitcoin, is a risk asset. For risk assets to move, and that includes Trump token, all of these kind of things, we need stability, not uncertainty. So if you're trying to answer the question, will 2026 be a bear or a bull year for Bitcoin, the answer will be probably whatever the economic policy is next year. If it's calmer, if it's more stable, then we could potentially avoid a steep retrace for Bitcoin and a recovery for the altcoin market. But if we don't, and we get more of the same, the altcoin market remains stagnant and Bitcoin will enter a bear phase, limiting upside potential.
Hi there, I'm James. I'm the founder of ArcisFX. I'd like to personally invite you to join our 24/7 trading group. This is built for traders who want an edge. Inside, you'll get access to live calls on Forex, commodities, crypto, energies, and metals, along with exclusive daily analysis designed to unlock your trading potential. And this in both traditional and now in digital markets. I'm talking Bitcoin, crypto, altcoins, and tethered currencies. You'll gain early access to insider news, real-time updates, real-time support, and premium educational content. If you want to sharpen your skills and boost your success rate, then join me and Paul in this community. This is a fast-growing community of traders who are now writing their own success stories. So don't wait. Join up now. Your edge starts right here.
But now let's check in with the key levels to watch this week. So this is Bitcoin 4-hour chart, and if you're looking to take a long play here, the next area to pay attention to is back at local support in this ideal entry zone here, which is essentially straddling local support. Obviously what you want to look for, what we're all looking for essentially, is a higher low from Bitcoin. So that would essentially mean that we're coming down, back down to local support, but we're not dipping below this previous swing low, which is around 80.5k, therefore forming a reversal pattern, potentially a double bottom of sorts, and then we bounce from there and potentially break out. This is the premise of this trade. Obviously, you're not going to come in here because this is very close to resistance, and there's a potential short opportunity here, actually, if you look to enter at around 89k and then ride it all the way back down to approaching local support, maybe taking profits at around 82k, something like that. There's a short play here. So wait for a retrace back down to here, look for a bounce, which is a higher low, and then you can front run a potential break from there. That would be the idea. But of course, if this doesn't hold, that would mean then you should be looking for an entrance down at major support, which is 75 to 73k. But let's run through these key levels. First up, we have local support at 81k, with major support, which we haven't tapped yet, just below between 73 and 75k. The invalidation for any kind of bullish context would be if we head below 73k. So 73k is your invalidation line. And because Bitcoin has now moved below the 3-day 200 MA, we've also lost 89k, which is a very important level on multiple timeframes. So that now 89k is acting as local resistance to the price action. And overhead, we have major resistance between 96 and 98k. We have this 4-hour 200 MA coming in quite flush with this diagonal resistance line. So if Bitcoin can come down here, put in a higher low, form a potential double bottom, and then break out from here, we can get above the 4-hour 200 MA and this diagonal resistance, which has been holding the price action back for a month or so now, and then we can break out from here. That is the premise we're looking for at the moment. But this entry zone is the next possible entrance for a long time. But that's it for now. I'm Paul with ArcisFX. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave us a comment. I'll be back tomorrow with a members-only live stream with my good friend James, so if you're not a member, please consider joining. It's only a couple of bucks. And then I'll be here again on Thursday for a crypto-focused live stream where you can ask me questions, get me to check out the tokens you're thinking of trading, and we can also see how Bitcoin is doing at the back end of the week. And then, of course, I'll be back with altcoin gems on Friday, so you've got some nice setups to trade. And also, if you're not already in our private group, you can check out the link in the description, as we'd love to have you. Catch you in the next vlog.